Today's project is welding a cast iron utility pump, a Red Lion jet sprinkler utility pump number RJSE-50. So I live in Texas, and sometimes I forget my water pump is outside, and in the wintertime we'll get a freeze that didn't expect it, and I forgot about my water pump because I hadn't turned it on for months. So it cracked. This is what's happened. This is actually, I hate to say it, the second time I've had to weld it. The first time I didn't think about making a video. Second time I decided, you know what, somebody is probably going to be in a similar boat, and to try to get a piece like the front piece, it's quite expensive, if not half the cost of a new pump. So this works, and let's go through the process. Unfortunately, I thought about making a video after I disassemble it, but we will reassemble the pump and you will see how to take it apart. Anyway, there I'm looking at the crack. I'm analyzing it. I'm also grinding away any paint, cleaning it up, if you will, making a nice clean surface so I can see that I'm looking at where the cracks are. And I'm just using a standard MIG welder. We just looked at the settings. The wire size is .030. Now, something about cast iron is you don't want to do a whole lot of welding all in one shot. It's better to do like maybe 2-3 inches, stop. 2-3 inches, stop, so that you don't overheat the cast iron. The danger with cast iron is that because it's different thicknesses, it can expand too quick and you can create a new crack. Again, this is the second time I've done this. Now I'm using the stick here to help stabilize and have a little bit better control. Now I am not a professional welder. You're probably going to see my welding isn't the greatest, but it works. Now what I'm doing here, and you'll see it in other videos, I am preheating the cast iron. Again, the objective is not to apply too much heat in one concentrated area so that we don't get a crack in some other place of the cast iron. I think a general rule is if you can take a magnet and it can stick, then you can weld. So again, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do about 3 inches. Unfortunately, you're not going to see it really very well since you're seeing the top of my head. Yeah, don't mention the lack of hair up there. I've learned to live with it, so I don't care anymore. At any rate, what I'm doing is I'm doing about 2 to 3 inches on the crack, and then I'm giving it a little bit of a break, and then I'm continuing the bead another 2 or 3 inches. Again, it depends on where the crack is. Now, with all that splatter, I could have had this thing maybe a little bit hotter, but it's a little bit tricky. It's not like regular steel, this cast iron. It's definitely a little bit trickier to weld. So I had to look at all of the spots that I could see a crack, and I had to basically follow every crack. And you can, and this method will work. Again, this is the second time I've done it. First time it worked, second time it's going to work again. I'm kind of cleaning it up, getting a little bit of the slag off of it. I'm kind of looking. There I can see next to where that nut is, there's a little, I think it's a 1/4 inch threaded nut. That I need to do some welding there also. So it's a little bit easier to see on the inside where the cracks, because it telegraphs to the inside as well as on the outside. So again, I'm just sort of reanalyzing it, looking at every place that I need to put a little bit more steel, a little bit more rod. Now you might feel that because this is under pressure, you have to be real precise and real accurate. The interesting thing with cast iron, it has a tendency to rust, and even though your weld are not completely waterproof, it'll actually oxidize, rust, and the oxide will plug up the hole, and so it'll work. So I've completed all the welding. And what we want to do is, I got a bucket of sand here. I want to embed this thing in the sand, and we want it to slow cool. We don't want to heat it up real fast and have it cool real fast. So the idea is to let it cool slower. So there it is, more or less. Again, I can't say it is the prettiest of welds, but this is, again, this is not my career welding, so if I'm able to do it, I'm a general novice. with general experience, you can do it also. So all we're doing now is I'm basically cleaning up my weld. I'm also looking to see if I've got any places that I can see maybe where I didn't weld and there's still a visible crack where I'm going to get some water spraying. Now remember, this pump is under pressure, so it's not like just gravity-fed water that you got to worry about. Now you've got, I don't know, I think this is like 50 psi or something, half horsepower. Do size your pump correctly. Like I think when I first started looking at pumps for my application, I've got I think a 3,000 gallon water tank in the backyard, and I wanted to pump water up to the front for gardening, for landscaping, basically rain harvesting, if you will. And you can find cheap pumps, but boy, you really have to understand lift, pressure, pumping capacities. The engineers at Red Lion are excellent. They'll actually help you to understand the science on how to properly pick and size a pump, because you will burn a pump out if you get a cheapy pump and you try to get it to do what it can't do, especially under long, heavy-duty, repeated usage. So these are great pumps. I have no complaints with the pumps. I thought they were excellent. The only complaint I've got is to myself for not bringing disconnecting the pump. So I went ahead and I've done all the welding. I've done all the grinding. There it is, more or less. It's not pretty. It's not designed to sell. It's just designed to keep working and to hopefully stop too much rusting. You could paint it red. It would look a whole lot better, but I wanted to make sure that I had a good seal before I actually painted it red. Now this is a plastic male adapter, so make sure you do not thread it incorrectly. It's very easy to do. I did it. I had to take it on and off a couple of times to get it to thread correctly. Could use a little bit of Teflon tape to help seal it. Yeah, I think if you get a pump that's designed and it's a quality pump, it'll last you year after year. You get a cheap Harbor Freight pump, it'll last you 1 year and it still probably won't do the job that it wants. Yeah, I'm kind of impressed with these pumps. I mean, they're quite good, basically, well made. They do the job. I mean, I can take what I think I'm pumping from down at the lower part of my property. I think it's 200, 300 feet to the front through a garden hose, and it's able to pump uphill about 300 feet. So that's pretty cool, 200 to 300 feet. So we are kind of going in reverse. So when you are welding, because of the amount of heat, you do want to take off anything and all things that are plastic. You're going to see some of the interior parts are plastic or vinyl or nylon, some sort of ABS maybe, some sort of plastic, and you're going to have to take them off. You don't want to melt it. Now this cone, I'm putting a little bit of silicone paste on it, on the threads, just so that should I have to take it apart again in the future, it's going to be a little bit easier. It's not oil. This is more of a silicone, plumber silicone. Now this is tricky. It threads in like a bolt, but you have to have this, I think it's a 3/4 head, hex head. I didn't have a male 3/4, so what I'm going to do is, I think it's 3/4, yeah, it looks like it's 3/4 5/8, I think it's 3/4. Taking a 3/4 bolt and using that in the inside, and it works. Now the first time you take the pump apart, the components are going to be pretty stiff. You're going to feel like you're going to break something, but this thing threads in regular thread, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. I just used a drill to seat it, if you will. So this is the gasket, and so when you do take the pump, this is the Venturi, I believe. I think that's what they call it. I'm putting a little bit of silk on it also, just to let it slide in. I don't think there's a right position that you have to put this venturi in place. Like you might think, oh, does it need to go here? Does it need to go there? I think it just freely floats in that shoulder. Yeah, perhaps somebody from Red Lion will see it and they'll say, oh, this is called that or this. So this is the gasket. And just so you don't have to buy a part, I mean, the gasket is still reusable. It's still got a lot of rubber flexibility in it. It's not all cracked. And so I'm careful when I took it apart. So this is the pump component. This is basically all one piece. It does have 4 bolts that holds it together. So I found that it was a little bit easier to put the gasket on the pump part, on the motor part, sorry, on the motor part, and then drop the pump part on top of it so that you keep the gasket kind of in alignment. You don't want to put it on crooked and have a separation between the pump and the motor. So here I'm wanting to make sure that I've got the position of the 4 bolts. So I'm paying attention to the way the motor sits and the way this top pump part seats on top of the motor. I'm looking at the bottom. There's a little base that the pump has that it sits on. So I'm calculating where that is, and then I know where the position of the pump. I mean, it's not all that difficult to take apart. I'll be honest, the first time is the most difficult time to separate the pump from the motor. I mean, I banged and banged and banged until I called tech support, and I called 2 different people. It was actually a woman engineer that explained to me the proper way to do it. The first guy just said, "Oh no, just hit the pump part and just knock it off." And man, I like banged and banged and banged, and it did not work. And I think the woman engineer had a better technique where I'm going to show it to you here in a second, and it's quite important. If you get anything from this video, it's going to be how to take this part apart without destroying your pump. I mean, a rubber mallet wouldn't do it. I even took like a solid hammer, and I could feel that I was going to crack it. Yeah, you can see in the bottom of the pump there is a chunk, a steel taken out from the bottom of the motor part. I forgot to put the bracket on. There I'm making sure that the gasket has not moved. Yeah, I can't say enough. I think that this is really a very excellent pump. I think for the cost, for the performance, I definitely like the engineer support. It was nice to have somebody explain to me and actually basically calculate what the distance is, how far I'm going, how high the rise is for the pump, and the friction loss in the holes in your line, calculating the capacity of the pump. So I think they did a pretty good job in sizing me a pump that works. Because again, you can have a undersized pump and it might work for a certain length of time, but boy, if it's undersized, it's a lot of work. I mean, these pumps are doing a lot of work, and you're going to burn up a less powerful pump, if you will. This one's a 1/2 horsepower, and I would say at minimum you can get 1/2 horsepower, but there's some other metrics engineer-wise that you have to calculate in to know that you're matching the performance of the pump with the job that you want the pump to do, which has to do with the friction that you lose with the water in the garden hose or whatever hose that you're using, the rise, how high are you pumping the water up? Are you going from the bottom of a well? It's much harder to pump up, by the way. than to push the water. And then there is also gravitational energy loss, or that you have to calculate with it going uphill, which is what I had to do. The reason I forget about the pump, like in the wintertime, we have lots of rain and the pumps fill up, and I don't use it very much, and so there may be months and months that I don't even turn the pump on in the wintertime, and then boom, we have a freeze that comes in, and I forget about the pump, and so that's why I got kind of snagged. So I thought I would get better at welding, certainly just by keeping up with this, and it works. I mean, here's the thing, it does work. Now, the beauty with cast iron is you don't have to be perfect with your welding, because you're going to see when we actually hook the pump up, there's a couple little tiny little pinholes, a spray of water. But over time, and it might take like a month or 2 months, those things will seal up because of the corrosion, because the pump, okay, now we've got to pay attention here. So the gasket is there. We don't want to break the gaskets because we want to reuse it. So we want to put this blade, which is a fairly strong blade, we want to break the seal between the pump, the front of our pump, separated from the motor. And so that's the rubber gasket, and so you want to go between the rubber gasket and the pump part, which is the front part. You want to preserve, not crack up that gasket, because we're going to reuse that gasket. And so what I do is I just sort of jam in this blade, if you will, and I go all the way around the entire perimeter, so I kind of break the seal. And then it is, without a doubt, this is the way to do it. I tried the other way, and I took a chunk out of my motor. I even noticed that even the second time around, I broke it 1 year. Following year, it cracked again, and it was still difficult to take apart. So once you have gone all the way around the perimeter, you can take a rubber mallet and go around the pump, and it'll come off. Okay, so here, you're going to put everything together. You're going to be oh so disappointed, because you're going to see a little spray of water, and the impulse might be to say, oh, I got to take it back in and weld it. So you can see, but there's probably about 2 or 3 little drips, but those things are going to go away. So even though it looks unhappy, leave it. And I swear, maybe it's a month, maybe it's 2 months, but eventually they'll seal up with the rust, and you've got a performing pump back again. There you get a pretty good look. And like even that one, that's a pretty big hole, and that thing eventually sealed up on its own too. So I hope this helps you to